Well, hello, my name is Beth, and I want to talk to you sort of about my life experience and how my faith has grown and fallen apart and regrown. So Proverbs 16:9. Within your heart you can make plans for your future, but the Lord chooses the steps you take to get there. My path and steps were not as expected. So I grew up in Northeast Ohio. My parents were married. I have one sister. Pretty normal childhood. We went to church, but really weren't encouraged to have a relationship with God. It was go to the Methodist church because that's what we do on Sundays. So that's what I did. I was a bad teenager and would not participate in my 6th grade confirmation class. I now have a 14-year-old that's giving some of that back to me. But did not do that. Decided to go to a Methodist college, and then when I was finally 21 years old, did that confirmation class and took that step on my time. So that helped grow my faith. In high school, I wanted to go to a different church to youth group because there were boys there. My mom wasn't super supportive of that, but that's what teenagers do. So I went away to college, to that Methodist college, had probably too much fun, but was also in an environment that helped you grow your faith, both academically, because you had to take 2 or 3 religion courses. I think we had to take 2 at that time. But you were also surrounded with people and experiences that helped grow your faith. So go to Cancun. I went on a mission trip to Atlanta when we different types of experiences. So through my experience in college, I became very driven, maybe too driven. Like maybe that's how I handle anxiety, is to be perfect and achieve things and to hide things. Would you agree with that, Kim? So from there, I went to graduate school, got a master's degree, and then moved to Florida on my own. So I was 22 at that time. Worked at a college in Florida, was very excited, had my first apartment alone without roommates. And so Mom and Dad and my sister were going to come down and visit to see me in Florida. Well, our trip did not go as planned. I was in a meeting on campus, my first meeting that I was leading about enrolling the freshman class, and my boss came in and said, we have to go, you have a phone call. My mother, at 48 years old, dropped dead on the beach when she was walking on the beach. My little sister had to do CPR unsuccessfully, and then we had to figure out and make plans to get her home, and what was that going to look like. I had only been living in Florida probably a month and a half on my own, so it would have been super easy to pack up those things in that apartment and go home and live with Dad. But I didn't. I stayed in Florida. I think I was supposed to stay there. That was a path that I wasn't expecting, but I stayed. So through that experience, I met my husband, Dean, and we had a lot of fun. I met him through work. We probably had too much fun. But we lived in an area of Florida that really wasn't designed for 20-somethings. It was a snowbird community. But we got married, and we were both very career-focused. He was a financial planner, and I worked in higher education, and then we got to the point in life where it was leave Florida or stay forever. So we opted to take a chance and a risk, and we moved to Tuscaloosa, Alabama, so I could continue my education. And he was unemployed for a few months, but found his path there as well. So, funny story, we actually got married twice, and that'll be important later, so don't let me forget to tell you why. So we eloped and didn't tell any family, and then had the big wedding in Ohio with all of our friends and family. So things were going well in Alabama. I was close to finishing my PhD coursework. I was getting ready to write. He was in an executive MBA program, and our friends from Sunday school started having babies. I was like, ooh, I don't know about having a baby. I wanted to be done with this degree and be, on the track to be a vice president of a university. I was super focused. But we decided to try, and, didn't take long. So I was expecting in May of 2007, focused on graduate school work and now a baby. So we were getting the house ready. I'm going to fast forward to October of that year. We were getting ready to go to 2 conferences. My husband had one in D.C. and I had one in Baltimore, and we were going to take separate flights but stay a few extra days and have fun. Who's been pregnant in here, right? You have lots of cravings. I wanted peanut butter and jelly that night in a really bad way. So I left and went to Publix to get my peanut butter and jelly. We had retired. He had been moving in the baby furniture that day, painting her nursery. And I come home and pull in the driveway, and he's laying on the front porch. I'm like, why is he laying on the front porch? This is really odd. So I get out of the car, and I go over, and he's unresponsive. So cell phones were not what they are now, so I struggled calling 911 on my little Razor flip phone, got the house phone, attempted to do CPR. I had to pick him up. He was, 6'1", over 200 pounds, and I'm 6 months pregnant. So I had called 911. I had some wonderful neighbors that were healthcare providers that came over to sort of help. They weren't really helpful. So I called my Sunday school friends, and they came over, and I kind of knew he was gone. The ambulance wouldn't let me ride with him. They had me ride with my girlfriend. So we rode to the hospital, and there, we were there a while, and a physician told me that he had passed away. And he was 32 years old, and I was 30, 6 months pregnant with my daughter. So what do you do? What do you do in that moment? Well, if you're me, you start worrying about all the people that are going to show up, right? So there's furniture on my front porch. The house is unlocked. These are things that are going through your mind to sort of cover up the experience that you're having, right? You start thinking about, I need to clean. I need to make beds. That's really not an appropriate response, but it's covering up what you don't want to feel, that shock. So that evening, they wanted to admit me to keep me, and I refused. So they did let me go home. And then I would say love is the people in your life that you connect with. I had great friends there from church and work. And then my college roommate that I see maybe once a year showed up that next day. She somehow got on a flight when someone called her, and she was there and slept in the bed with me. So I had people coming from everywhere. So you can imagine small town Alabama, people started to talk. They started to talk about me. People I didn't know were bringing food, things I didn't need, and talking about, what I had and what I didn't have. They shared over town that I didn't have any family, that my mom had died, I didn't have any siblings. Not true. I have a sister. I have a dad. And that I, was going to be destitute. Well, I had a job that provided health insurance. I was going to keep going to work. But one of the things that happened, there was a prayer group in town that was in one of the nicer neighborhoods, I'll put it that way. And they decided several months after this happened that they needed to do a diaper drive for me without asking me. One of the women in the group I knew, she had lost her 2 children, twins, after they were born. So she kind of understood where I was coming from. And I said, well, you can bring the diapers to the house, but I only need 1 pack because I'm running low. You can take the rest to the shelter downtown. So lots of experiences that didn't feel loving, that were maybe coming from the right place in people's hearts, but check with folks. Ask them what they need. Just don't do those things. And this may sound different, but when someone passes away, people bring food. Are you familiar with this? Particularly in the South. And they want to come and they want to visit. And then I have people coming from out of town that want to tour my home, and I'm grieving and I'm pregnant. You know what people need, particularly in the South? Extra toilet paper because they use your bathroom, and trash bags to throw away all of the casserole things that you don't want. Okay? So those are some things that happened. So I found myself, my dad stayed with me for a couple weeks. I went back to work, but I found myself sitting in the closet of our master bedroom. My dad was there, and we'd lost my mom, so he understands the things that need to be done. We need to clean out the closet. We need to clean out, we need to take care of business, so to speak. So he's there executing that, and I'm just crippled on the closet floor. Like, how am I going to have a baby by myself with no family in the state where I live? And I just had this wave of comfort and support that can only come from one place. And I felt the love of God. And I got up and I cleaned out the closet and I went back to work. My daughter is giving me fits these days. She's 14 and in the 8th grade. She entered the world that way. She came a month early. I was at work. I worked in the College of Nursing at the University of Alabama with a bunch of nurses. And they said, "You don't look well today." I said, "Well, thank you. That's great. We want to take your blood pressure." So they did, and I went immediately to the hospital and had an emergency C-section. Guess who showed up that next day? My college roommate. She stayed for a week and a half. She has 3 children. She left her 3 daughters at home with her husband and stayed with me to teach me how to be a mom. They wanted me to breastfeed, and she said, "No, you don't have time for that. It's just you. You can't. No." So she helped me learn to be a mom, and I went back to work. So I had my daughter, McKenna, alone, and then decided it was time to write that dissertation. Yes. Now, I was medicated. We're talking a little bit about mental health. So I was in counseling. I needed medication to focus, all of those things that people don't want to talk about. But I decided it was time to write. I sold my home because I couldn't focus there. Was not looking to date anyone at all. I'm a single mom, widow, with a baby in a PhD program with a full-time job. I don't have time for that. But I saw this man one evening, and like a good Methodist, I had been to Bible study on a Wednesday night, and then we went for margaritas after. Anyways, I saw this man in the Mexican restaurant, and it turned out his stepmom had wanted us to meet anyways, and he was in town on leave from the Army, and so we connected, and he knew who I was and knew my story, and we dated long distance for a year. And then he proposed to me and my baby, and we packed up and moved across the country to Colorado. So there I found more unique experiences as a military spouse. That's a kind of community that you can't really describe to folks that haven't experienced it. It's instant, people overshare immediately, all kinds of things. So, we had a great marriage. We were married for 12 years, almost 13, and he was my Prince Charming, I thought. I gave up my career, moved across the country, but that didn't work out. So yet again, my plans were not as expected. He made some decisions about our family without talking to me. It was very hurtful to me, and I had to make a choice, and I said, I can't do that. So thought that, I felt that crumbled feeling again, like I was on the closet floor. And now I have a 13-year-old, 14-year-old at that time. Like, how am I going to navigate parenting her, dealing with him, all of those things? I reached out to my church, which is a great church, but it wasn't getting what I needed. So went across the street to a church that I've been going to since April of last year and went to their women's conference, and Kim was not the speaker, but she could be. But connected with folks there, and actually some of the women that I've met at some of these other conferences that she's been at, they were there as well. So I think when you're sort of in the depths of that despair, you have to remember to be hopeful and to be expectant. Right? COVID was hard for everyone. I think it was hard on marriages, it was hard on parenting, it was hard on kids going to school, and I think that sort of amplified what was happening in my marriage at the time. So I'm feeling down about that. Like, this was my marriage. This was the most important thing to me other than, the Lord. This was who I was. I was a mom and a wife. During that same time, the Lord tested me again, and I had to have a breast biopsy during COVID. It was the only surgery that day in the hospital. It was empty. And then I had a skin cancer scare 6 months later and had to have another surgery. I'm like, I can't take any more. What's going on? But really felt the desire to connect with folks. And so I did that in a number of ways. I've made new friends. I've connected with a new church. I've started dating someone, joined a kayak community, and then connected other divorced folks and shared my story with that group nationally. I went to Utah alone, and I hiked Bryce Canyon and Zion all by myself. It was guided, but I flew out there alone and did that. So I would say be hopeful and be expectant. And so some of the things that have stood out to me recently from some of the sermons at my church, and it's short and it's sweet, but I live in Augusta, so I did have a little bit of a drive this afternoon. But to remember that God's dream for your life is far bigger than yours. And so that's what I'll end with.